Hey, it's Jay. I wanted to extend a special thanks to those of you who have listened and left reviews on iTunes for this podcast. Please leave a review if you haven't done so already. We sincerely appreciate it. We're producing this show independently, and unfortunately, that is not free. We have to pay for digital hosting space, software, equipment, websites, and travel out of our own pockets. But we'd love to keep this show going as long as possible. Pledge your support by visiting www.bigbuckregistry.com/pledge. Thanks for your support and enjoy the show. Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, powered by ScentLock Enforcer, episode number 184. Dr. Dave Samuel, writer, professor, deer hunter, and Bowhunter Hall of Fame. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by the ScentLock Enforcer, Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, and Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hey, this is Hal Blood from Big Woods Bucks, and you're about to push play on my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Hey, this is Hannah Costello from Hall Brothers Outdoors, and you're about to push play on my favorite podcast, Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Waddell with the Bone Collector TV show, and you're getting ready to listen to another episode of the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. My name is Jay, and you know what? I'm wearing a really cool hat right now that I got at SHOT Show. It's a Yeti cooler hat, and I got to tell you, it's one of the best hats I've ever had. It feels real comfortable, and it was pointed out to me by my good friend from Ohio that we should pick up that hat as we walk by the cooler, and he's joining me right now. What's going on, Dusty?
Hey, what's up, Jay? Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in with us again this week. And I tell you what, SHOT Show was rocking, and we've seen some great things. And the Yeti hats, the Yeti coolers hats, fit pretty nice. I couldn't agree more to that. Just happened to be walking by, and we know some people at Yeti, and they hollered out and told us to grab a hat, and we picked up a hat, and Jim picked up a hat. Jay picked up a hat, and I picked up a hat, and now we're rocking some nice Yeti cooler hats, and they're comfortable, that's for sure.
Is it not like one of the most comfortable hats that you've worn? I put it on today, and I'm like, man, this thing is really nice.
Yeah, they are definitely comfortable.
Yeah. Got the old school camo on it, and it's got the trucker cap mesh in the back.
Right, yeah. It's definitely a nice hat for sure. But man, SHOT Show was good, and
yep.
Met a lot of great people, talked to a lot of great people, and I'm finally caught up on sleep and settled down from being in Vegas. It's definitely a time change and a journey that it's a challenge, really. You go from Eastern Standard to Vegas time, and you got a few hours there, and it messes with you a little bit, Jay. And I don't know if you're adjusted out, but I'm finally back where I'm pretty good now, but first couple of days there, I was man, it was tough.
I did. It kicked my butt. The first 2 days we were back. I kind of stayed up a little late the next day when we got back, but then I slept in, and then I thought I was all set, but then it just hit me hard. Like that Tuesday hit me solid in the face, like knocked me down.
Yeah, it was like a freight train.
It was a freight train.
Yeah, I asked my wife like 2 days after we got back. I said, "Hey, did you get the license plate number on that Mack truck? It ran me over."
Seriously, and I feel way better now. But it did take me about 2 days just to readjust after staying up late. I mean, you're in Vegas. You're not going to get a lot of sleep, and you're running around and trying to meet everybody you can at SHOT Show because they're all outdoor people, and you want to get to know as many people as you can.
Yeah, I mean, we were 7 to 10 miles walking inside a building every day. Not just the walking, but standing on our feet for several hours. And my vocal cords were a little tender when I got home from talking to everybody. And it was just, a great, productive week, no doubt about that. And, shout out to Jim Keller for hanging in there with us and kind of handling things on the on the production side as far as the camera and microphone, that stuff. And it, much appreciated for Jim being with us. And I tell you what, Jim Keller's a great dude, and look for him to be around for a good while longer.
Yeah, we dabbled in some video while we were there. We went around and videotaped some of our favorite products that we checked out. And if you wanted to see some of the videos, check out the Facebook page or our YouTube channel. You'll see some of the video productions that we put together. I was running the camera. Jim was running the audio microphone, recording all the audio. And Dusty was our pitch man. We found a natural calling for Dusty. He is a natural pitch man.
So it worked out great, and we met some great people. That's that's probably 90% of the whole journey is the people you meet on your journey, and
right.
We definitely met some great people there and shook some hands with some people that we had on the show and never been able to put a face with the name. And as far as face to face in Vegas, that lined us up to meet a lot of people that's been on the show and hang out with some good friends. And Joshua Carney was out there with Son of the South, and got to hang out with him, have dinner with him one night. Check him out on Facebook, Son of the South, Joshua Carney, good guy, and he's got a great story and doing great things in the industry.
He told us the great story about his hunting buddy Peanut. Now, I'm gonna grab the audio from that. I've got to talk to Josh to make sure we can have permission to play this stuff back. But it's a great story about his good buddy Peanut. We met some great people. And a lot of the people we met out there are going to be appearing on our show in the future years. So stay tuned over the next couple months. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to be great interviews coming up. Dusty, I got an email from a guy named Rob Ortopin. And he had a question. I'm going to run this by you because I think you're probably the most poised to answer this question.
Let's do it.
All right. He says, "Hey guys, love the podcast. I'm a newbie hunter trying to set up my 10 acres in northern lower peninsula of Michigan. I have a half dozen does and 2 bucks on camera periodically throughout the season, trying to get some ideas to set up to keep them moving through more frequently. Any help would be appreciated. Thanks, guys." What do you think, Dusty?
Well, I wish that he would clarify if he had 10 acres tillable land or wooded land, or I'm going to try to cover the bases here, and maybe I'll touch bases on, wooded land, cleared land, tillable land, farm ground, whatever. We'll start with the farm ground first. I'm going to say that if you can get some of that alfalfa in the ground up there, I know just from experiences talking to some people around here in Ohio that the UP is one of the better places for alfalfa hay at a high end hay as far as nutrients and the value of the nutrients for the animals that comes out of Michigan towards the UP. Alfalfa, get into some of the clovers and stuff like that. You can run some of that, but the only thing you got to be careful with in the UP is the conditions. Obviously, it's colder there. The freeze depth's going to be more. Trying to lay out all the variables for being a UP or in the upper. Get a little bit in the timber. I suggest maybe some hinge cutting some trees. Cut some good clear trails. That way the deer can move around comfortably and quietly to keep them there. Obviously, you need bedding, food, and water. Keep all that in mind. You get into the crops, you're going to have to find a variety of corn or soybeans that are quick germinating and quick maturing. A lot of people around in Ohio here plant 120-day corn. I know there's a few varieties out there that are an 80-day, and I know there's a 90-day maturity corn out there. And what I mean by that is the corn is ready to be harvested in 90 days with the conditions, the climate, and all that in Michigan, especially towards the UP. You're going to have a quick variety of corn that's going to mature quick, get up out of the ground, and make corn fast. That way that, with your later spring planting season, that you can get that coming up out of the ground, germinated good. Definitely check with your co-ops in the area, find out what kind of fertilization program you need to run for crops. If you got land that you can put crops on, get the soil tested, get a food source, a water source, and a bedding area. And I tell you, them deer will hang around you all year long, and especially with the conditions that you have up there. You might try late season to buy a few bales of hay. If it's legal, baiting sites, keep them fed. That's probably 85% of their livelihood, or maybe even 90% of their livelihood, is keeping that stomach full and keeping herself with some nutrition in their body so that the cold temperatures won't kill them off. And that's something up there that I know you're going to have deep snow. If you got a piece of equipment on that 10 acres and you got deep snow, you got a way to get a tractor and a blade in there, blade off some trails. If you know you got acorns up there or some kind of food source that's under the snow and you can get that blade on it, blade that snow off of there. Get them a place where they can survive. And if they can survive and maintain their body on your place, you'll have deer everywhere. Jay, that's the best I can help Rob out.
I think you did a good job. So, Rob, I told you you'd be good at answering this question. So, anyway, thanks for doing that for Rob. This week's guest is Dr. Dave Samuel, and Dr. Dave spent 30 years as a professor of wildlife management at West Virginia University. He's now in his 46th year with Bowhunter Magazine, where his column No Hunting still appears. He also writes the No Whitetails column for Whitetail Journal, the Future of Hunting column for bowhunting.net, and he writes a weekly outdoor column for West Virginia newspapers. During his surgery, the doctor cut his nerve to his diaphragm, so he has some trouble doing all those physical exercises that he was once accustomed to. But he's still extremely active, still a very, very good bow hunter. He won the Lifetime Achievement Awards from the National Bowhunter Education Foundation, and he is in the SCI Bowhunters Hall of Fame. We were introduced to Dr. Dave Samuel from our good friend Tom Staples over at Morris's Sporting Goods, and we reached out to Dr. Dave and to see what he's all about. He also has a couple books. One is called Whitetail Advantage, Whitetail Racks, and An Empty Quiver, a Lifetime of Bow Hunting Adventures, which is completely sold out. Before we turn to Dr. Dave Samuel, let's turn to Jim Keller with the Deer News.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. 2017 SHOT Show boasts big attendance and positive outlook for the firearms industry. The 39th Shooting, Hunting, and Outdoor Trade Show, the SHOT Show, owned and operated by the National Shooting Sports Foundation, the NSSF, signaled a positive year ahead for the firearms industry. Strong attendance, upbeat buyers and sellers, and a series of packed special events that collectively made up SHOT Week resulted in one of the top-rated SHOT shows ever. The show spanned January 17th through 20th at the Sands Expo in Las Vegas. Industry professionals packed the aisles from the opening bell, and attendance totaled nearly 65,000, surpassing last year's turnout to make it the second most attended SHOT show ever. There were thousands of products for buyers to see on the show floor, encompassing firearms, ammunition, accessories, optics, knives, gun safes, apparel, and law enforcement equipment, among other categories. More than 500 new products from 338 companies were on display in the show's New Products Center, sponsored by U.S. Concealed Carry Association. In addition to the more than 1,600 exhibiting companies on the main floors, a new pavilion provided first-time vendors for the show's extensive waiting list with welcome visibility and potential new customers. SHOT Show is the largest trade show of its kind in the world, attracting attendees from more than 100 countries. The show drew excellent reviews from exhibitors and attendees. Preparations have already begun for next year's 40th anniversary SHOT Show, which will return to the Sands Expo on January 23rd through 26, 2018. Missouri Department of Conservation reports final deer and archery turkey harvest. This story was originally featured on the SpringfieldNewsLeader.com website. Missouri's 2016-2017 deer hunting season ended on January 15th, with the Missouri Department of Conservation reporting a preliminary total harvest of 263,832 deer. Top counties for the overall season were Franklin with 5,272 deer harvested, Howell with 5,242, and Texas with 4,608. Hunters harvested 273,249 deer during the 2015-2016 deer hunting seasons. Preliminary data from the NBC showed that hunters checked 47,550 deer during the archery season. Top counties for the archery season were Jefferson with 1,118 deer harvested, Wayne with 980, and St. Louis with 979. Archery hunters checked 49,759 deer the previous year. Preliminary data from MDC showed 2,304 turkeys harvested during the archery season. Top counties for the fall archery turkey season were St. Clair with 57 birds harvested, Franklin with 51, and Greene with 50. For the previous year, hunters harvested 3,042 turkeys. Get more deer and turkey harvest data for the current season at short.ncb.gov huntfish.mdc.mo.gov/Z3G. For more information on hunting in Missouri, visit huntfish.mdc.mo.gov/hunting-trapping. Man spends thousands feeding deer in retirement. This story was originally featured on the WWLP Channel 22 website and was reported by Brenna Kelly. Richard McMahon, a retired man in Brownville, Maine, who used to hunt and eat deer, is now spending thousands of dollars to feed them instead. McMahon calls it a double-edged sword. From the time he started feeding the deer outside his window in Brownville, the herd practically tripled. McMahon's son helps out as his father grows older. McMahon spent $4,500 a year buying oats. Money, he says, is best spent on charity. McMahon said, "I think it's my calling. Everyone thinks I'm crazy for spending that kind of money, but I enjoy it, and I think I'm going to continue doing it." Conservation officers want you to help them find who shot and killed this well-known three-legged doe. This story was originally featured on the ABC RTV Channel 6 website and was reported by Katie Cox. A well-known three-legged doe was shot and killed in Hamilton County, Indiana, and conservation officers with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources are hoping someone can help them find the person who did it. Officers say the doe lost one of its legs several years ago and was a familiar sight to people who live in Deming and the surrounding Hamilton County area. She had even successfully raised several fawns over the years. But sometime late Sunday night or early Monday morning, someone shot her and left her to die in the field. A spokesperson for the DNR said the doe's death was reported soon enough for them to issue a salvage permit for the meat, but they still want to find the person responsible for killing her. Anyone with information on who might have shot and killed this doe is asked to contact the Indiana DNR at 1-800-TIP-IDNR. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry's Deer News. For links to the stories featured this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller with the Deer News. Without further ado, here's Dr. Dave Samuel.
Dr. Dave Samuel, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. It's nice to talk to you.
Well, thanks for joining us, Dave. It's always a pleasure to talk to somebody that's knowledgeable about deer and deer hunting, and anybody that we recognize as being a foremost authority on the biology of whitetail and somebody that knows how to hunt them. We encourage that type of guest on our show, and our listeners will deeply appreciate your presence here, and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
But Dave, tell us how you got started. You've written several articles. Tell us about where all this came from and your interest in wildlife biology.
Yeah, good question. And it started in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where my dad took me and my twin brother and my younger brother, who was 2 years younger. He took us all out to hunt when we were 12 years old, and of course, it was a major sacrifice for him, dragging 3 kids through the woods. But
sure.
But that exposed me to wildlife and the outdoors, and my identical twin brother as well. And that led both of us to go on to college and get PhDs, and we both became wildlife professors. My brother Bill taught wildlife at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, Canada for probably 35 years, and I taught wildlife at West Virginia University for 30 years. And
no kidding. Wow.
Yeah, and in so doing, I had a lot of graduate students doing research on whitetail deer. And then at the same time, starting in 1971, I happened to go on a bow hunt, my very first out-of-state bow hunt, with my first paycheck, my second paycheck from West Virginia University as a professor. I went to Colorado and hunted mule deer in August, and there was a couple bow hunters in that camp. I killed a big buck on that trip, by the way, and so I sat around the camp during the week and met everybody, and there were a couple guys from Indiana who said, "We're going to start a bow hunting magazine, and we're going to call it Bowhunter.
Yeah.
And we'd like a wildlife biologist to write for us. Would you be interested?" And, of course, I had never thought about being an outdoor writer, but I jumped on that, and that really changed my life because it just kept me in the forefront of bow hunting, and my teaching job, my professor job, kept me in the forefront of whitetail deer, and the two careers just sort of work together, and it's been a great ride for me. I'm now, well, I will tell you, I'm 76 years old. I killed 2 Pope and Young whitetail bucks this fall, this year. So I'm still out there bow hunting after many years. But in October of last year, 2016, I did my 45th anniversary issue with Bowhunter Magazine, and last week I just signed a new contract to work again for him this next year. So what a thrill.
That's fantastic.
2 great careers. I mean, how much fun is this?
Right.
Teaching wildlife students and then writing articles.
It sounds like a very nice life when it's all said and done.
It's been, I thank you, Lord, for these opportunities to be where I am, and it's just been great.
That's excellent. You've written some fascinating articles over the years, and I'd like to just explore some of those articles if we could before we kind of get into your strategies and techniques that you've developed over the years for your own deer hunting. Okay. One of the articles that kind of popped out is, we hear this word a lot, but I'm not sure we really understand what it is. You wrote an article for bowhunting.net called Will Prions End Deer Hunting? You wrote it back in September.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about prions, what they are, and how they're affecting what we're doing today?
Yeah, well, prions, it's hard to tell you what they are because not a lot of people can figure it out, but they're a mutated protein that causes chronic wasting disease in whitetail deer. Okay. And some people are not afraid of chronic wasting disease, but frankly, most deer biologists and wildlife biologists are very much concerned about chronic wasting disease, and I know I am. And it's spreading. The good news is human beings cannot get the disease, or at least never have.
Okay.
The bad news is the deer get it.
Right.
And when you get a prevalence rate of 40% or 30 to 40%, then it really becomes a problem because it kills a lot of older age class bucks. And that's happened in a couple places in the country, in Wisconsin and in Wyoming. And it's going to happen other places because we haven't figured out a way to stop this stuff. And these prions, and this is interesting, they are deadly little critters that you almost can't get rid of. You can't kill them with heat. You can't kill them with bleach. And so when an infected deer deposits these prions in its feces and its urine in the woods, they're there for decades. And if another deer happens to lick those things, and it gets the disease. So right now, we're not sure how we're going to ever get this thing stopped. But it's a potential major problem.
So it's not really it's not a bacteria, it's not a virus, it's just some kind
of... It's not a bacteria, it's not a virus, it's a mutated protein. And frankly, we've known about prions through some human diseases that get prions since 1920 or so.
Oh, wow.
And here we are almost 100 years later, and we still don't know very much about them. So it just tells you what... this infectious agent is a very complicated micro, whatever it is, and that's one thing. And since we can't really put our fingers on them, it's then how do you stop them if you don't really even understand what they are?
Right.
So anyway, it's really complex stuff.
Right. Gotcha. All right, so it's a threat to the deer herd, and we don't know a whole lot about it, but we need more. Sounds like we need more research on it.
There is tons of it going on, and we're starting to learn more. But the latest scary research shows that when you get 30% prevalence, when the deer in an area, when 30 to 40% of them have chronic wasting disease, and you can't, and the deer don't show it, they just have it. Some deer will show it, but most deer don't show it. And when you get that high prevalence rate, then the older bucks start to die, big time. I mean, big time.
Okay.
And think about what that would do for deer hunting.
Right.
If we don't have any we have a low number of 3.5, 4.5, and 5-year-old bucks. That's a major problem.
That's a huge problem. It sounds like there's some that are carriers. There's some that are symptomatic, and it could be devastating to the older buck population.
It seems to be that way right now.
That is not good. All right. Let's move on to something else that's a little dangerous and certainly a new phenomenon that we've only seen over the last probably 10 years in its prevalence. That's social media relative to hunting. You wrote an article about social media and saying it's not our friend. And certainly, I mean, social media is just getting bigger and bigger, new avenues. Why do you think social media is not our friend?
Well, first off, let's just chat a second about social media.
Sure.
And hunters and deer hunters. When 20 years ago, there was no such thing as Facebook and Twitter. It didn't exist. And today, it's in everybody's hands. They just turn their phone on and go to Facebook and Twitter and talk to each other all the time. And what that's done relative to negatives is best exemplified by Cecil the lion from Zimbabwe last year.
Right.
When a bow hunter shot this lion, and everybody said it was not everybody, but the anti-hunters just seized on this because Cecil was a research animal that had a radio collar on it. So when Cecil died, the researchers knew about it, and of course, when anti-hunters heard about this, Cecil immediately became some kind of a pet lion that was lured out of the park and shot by this terrible bow hunter, and et cetera. Well, it was all illegal, and there were hundreds of thousands of reports on Facebook and Twitter that generated hundreds of thousands of newspaper stories, and all of them were negative, or almost all of them were negative towards lion hunting. And here's what's happened out of that. First off, the hunter did nothing illegal. Nobody has ever been arrested for anything because it wasn't legal. But now Zimbabwe had to curtail their lion hunting because of all this mass media pressure. And the game department now is very short of money and doing things that are sort of foolish to raise the money, because the game department in Zimbabwe, it's not like America. They are very poor, and they generate their money for lion management from lion hunters, and the lion hunters don't go to Zimbabwe anymore. And so I saw 2 weeks ago where the game department in Zimbabwe sold 35 elephants to China for millions of dollars because they needed the money to manage lions. And so, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of the negative things that have happened because of social media and Cecil the lion.
Right.
The European Union won't let anybody import any of the big 5 animals into Europe. Any of the hunters can't do that, and that stops hunting in Africa, and that's where the money and jobs come from in Africa. So social media is not our friend. Because it allows the fringe element to just go crazy. And as I pointed out in that article, 75% of the public supports wildlife management in the United States for hunting as a wildlife management tool. The public supports that. But when social media gets a hold of tidbits like Cecil the lion and goes crazy with them, common sense goes out the window.
Right.
And this isn't just true. Social media isn't hurting just hunting. I mean, it affects all aspects of our lives. Just look at the presidential election,
right.
What social media, the role it had.
Right.
So it changes things, and my word to hunters is you need to be careful when you're on social media.
Okay.
Because you're under a microscope.
Right.
So you just can't go out there and ramble along and think everybody will understand. They don't.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Speaking of politics and hunting, you wrote another article about politics and hunting, and politics and science specifically. Do you feel like there's enough or disconnect between politicians' efforts and where the science of whitetail studies are going?
That's a really good question, and it's politics has always stuck its nose into wildlife management, especially with state game departments and game commissioners, and then the politicians who control the budgets of the state game departments. And so that we've always had that problem. But it just seems that in the last 10 years, it's gotten way more, politics seems to play a much bigger role in directing the management of some of our species, especially whitetail deer.
Okay.
Because it's such a high-profile species. And the game departments are sort of trapped there. I mean, most game departments, most wildlife agencies are always short of money. They never have enough money to do the things they need to do. And they need hunting license increases. And even when the hunters support that, which they don't always do, but even when the hunters support a license increase, the politicians don't grant it. They don't grant, and so the wildlife agencies are short of money, and the politicians control the pocketbooks, and the politicians can then really control the agencies and how they manage things. If a couple prominent politicians don't think there's enough deer in the areas where they hunt, they can dictate policy to the game department and threaten them literally by saying, "Hey, if you don't change these regulations, you ain't getting your money this year." And that's an undercurrent of what can really be going on, and the politicians can use the press and get a lot more press than the game department can. So
right.
Biologists, we biologists, we're not into doing interviews and with news people and going around and giving speeches to get them to agree with our position on a management question. Biologists just want to do their job, manage wildlife.
Right.
But politicians, they're out there beating the drum all the time, and they have access to the public much more than the biologists do. So
right.
They have become a bit of a problem in many states. Politicians are. It's becoming a problem, and it's a bigger problem than it used to be. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. All right. Got it. Here's another problem that seems to be going on, and it seems like every couple weeks our news guy talks about this particular situation. I'm as a hunter, I'm always kind of perplexed by it, but it's the idea of bow hunting versus birth control. I hear that Staten Island is doing all kinds of vasectomies on bucks, and it's
they are.
It's going crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Why is this a political thing and that's spearheaded by anti-hunter movements? Why not just have more bow hunting?
Well, the question you're asking relates to these urban bow hunts and urban deer problems.
Right.
is really what you're talking about. And urban deer problems are becoming bigger and bigger because more and more people live in these cities, and the deer have and the urban cities are sprawling out into deer country. So many of our cities, especially on the East Coast, and even out into Chicago, et cetera, we've got deer problems. Bow hunting has a great tool to solve those problems.
Right.
It is totally safe and it works. However, some people, anti-hunters, don't like bow hunting, never have, and they think it's cruel and inhumane, et cetera. And so if a community, and there's only been a few, if a community is wealthy and has enough money, some citizens can stop a bow hunt by going to court, and it happens all the time. And then they may convince the local people that run that city, your mayor and your people that run manage the city politics. They can convince them to try chemostimulants and sterilizing. And the biggest project that's ever been done is now going on in Staten Island, where the citizens had a major deer problem, and a lot of people complained and wanted to have a bow hunt, but it's a pretty difficult situation to have a bow hunt on Staten Island. And so a handful of citizens convinced the mayor of New York City and others to spend a huge chunk of money and sterilize bucks, do vasectomies on bucks. I wrote several articles about this, and most biologists thought this will never work.
Right.
But I saw yesterday that they now have captured, and they're spending over a 2-year period, $3 million to sterilize enough bucks to potentially reduce the deer population by 10 to 30%.
Wow.
Here's the thing. Bow hunters could do that for nothing, but the citizens have decided we'll spend taxpayers' dollars, $3 million worth, and to lower the deer herd by 10 to 30%. I think it's a little bit ludicrous, but so far they have sterilized, did vasectomies now on 540 bucks on Staten Island.
It's just
and so
insane.
I never thought they could catch that many, but they have done that.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. First off, it's not going to reduce the deer population by much. And secondly, they're going to have to keep doing this year after year after year. So it's an interesting scenario. Only one other city has done this out in Michigan. They're doing it right now in a town.
Yep.
Otherwise, all the other thousands of cities that have urban deer problems are conducting bow hunts, and they're working just fine.
Okay. All right. Very good. It's such a bizarre situation. It seems like bow hunting.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy.
I mean, well, what's bizarre is spending $3 million to reduce the deer herd.
Right.
Whoa,
I mean, the bow hunters alone would probably spend close to that on gear if they could get in there.
I agree. Yeah. Well, anyway.
That's another discussion for another day.
Yeah, that's a whole program.
So you spent a lifetime in wildlife biology and writing about hunting itself. You know a lot about whitetail deer. What are some of the things that you've picked up on over the years that you find intriguing about the whitetail that you didn't know maybe necessarily when you began?
Well, that's a good question. In fact, I guess that's a question you could ask every deer hunter.
You could.
What is so intriguing about whitetail deer that gets millions of us out there hunting them every year? And I'll be honest with you. I'm in the Pope and Young Club, and I meet bow hunters who hunt all over the world all the time. And if you ask them, what one species do you really enjoy hunting the most? I mean, what is and invariably they always say whitetail deer. And I say I've been to Africa 8 times. I've hunted in Argentina. I've hunted in New Zealand and all over the country, in Alaska and wherever. And there's no question in my mind, whitetail deer is the species I enjoy hunting the most. And I guess you ask about intriguing. We go through an evolution as whitetail deer hunters. When I was a young kid with my bow, a spike buck was just fine. I mean, or a doe. I wasn't very particular. And I'm still not very particular relative to getting some deer in the freezer. I shot 2 does early in the bow season because my wife and I will eat 2 deer a year. And if I don't get some deer meat in the freezer, I'm in big trouble in this house. So I always want to do that. But then once I've done that and gotten some meat in the freezer, I want to hunt bigger bucks, and I do. And I pass up the smaller bucks, which when I was young, I would never pass up. So we go through an evolution. We still hunt for meat. I know I do, and all of my friends do as well. But then when it comes to once we get that meat, we don't shoot small bucks anymore. The older we get, at least a lot of my friends, we're intrigued by these bigger bucks. And here's what's interesting to me about it. I just wrote an article about this too. When I started my career as a wildlife professor, I wondered why I wasn't seeing bigger bucks. I was hunting them, I thought, And Gene and Barry Winslow, who are identical twin bow hunters out of Iowa, and the two of the best whitetail deer hunters, in my opinion, that ever lived. And they said to me, Dave, the reason you're not seeing bigger bucks is you're not hunting them. You're looking at scrapes, and you think all the scrapes are the same, and they're not. Some of those scrapes are big buck scrapes, and you got to learn to do that and start hunting big bucks. And so I sort of changed the way I looked at hunting in the wind and where I put my stands, and started studying more the behavior of the older bucks. And I started to see more older bucks. And when you do that, not only do you see more older bucks, but you see tons of smaller bucks as well. And so that has evolved in my hunting ability, learning a whole lot more about how these old guys behave as opposed to yearling bucks. And it's always a challenge, and there's always something to learn. I'm 76 years old. I've been chasing deer since I was 12 years old. So, 64 years worth of chasing deer. And every time I go to the woods, literally every time, I learn something about whitetail deer that I didn't know before. You can never know it all. And then combining that with my interest in scientific research now shows that these old bucks are all individuals, which makes it a real challenge to hunt them. And what I mean by that is some old bucks breed a lot of does, and some don't breed any. They don't even rut. A few old bucks don't even participate in the rut.
Wow.
I don't know what that's all about, but it sure makes hunting them different. Some old bucks move a lot, and some don't move at all.
Right.
Some have big home ranges, and some have small home ranges. And so bucks are individuals, and just like human beings. And so when you're trying to hunt one particular buck, it's tough to pattern him because every buck's different.
That's a very...
Boy, does that make it fun.
Yeah.
It makes it fun, though.
Makes it fun, and it's a very interesting concept that I'm not sure we've thought a lot about, is that, we try to put, and our biology tries to, and brains try to put these theories into a category and make generalizations about deer hunting, when in fact we're probably putting a generalization in the wrong category, because these are such individualized deer. They don't have necessarily all the same mannerisms or patterns or instincts. So you don't.
Yeah, and the reason we now know that today, even though Gene and Barry Winslow told me that 30 years ago, that a certain bucks don't rut at all, and I didn't believe them. But we now know today, because of DNA research, as well as putting radio collars on deer, we know a whole lot more about their behavior and their breeding patterns because of technology. And what the technology is showing is that some of these old-time bow hunters like Gene and Barry Winslow, it shows that they were right all along. Their observations in the field were correct, and we've now confirmed those observations through science. Sort of cool.
That is cool. Do you have any concerns about the state of the deer herd in the United States as a whole, or other pockets of concern, maybe with EHD or other diseases, or just states and politics and things like that?
Well, here, it's interesting that you asked that question, because I was reading some stuff yesterday about this. What we saw in the 80s and especially the 90s and early 2000 was a great increase in whitetail deer populations literally throughout whitetail range. Deer herds just started to blossom and just increase. And so all the hunters who came into hunting in the late 80s and the 90s, they'd go out, now maybe not up in the North Country where you are, but down here where I am, because your populations just aren't as large up there, but down here where I am, the deer hunters who started, the bow hunters who started, for example, bow hunters who started bow hunting in the 1990s, they'd go out and see 20 deer a day, and they thought that was normal.
Right.
Well, 30 years ago, when I would go out, if I could see 5 deer a day, I thought that was a great day.
Right.
And many times I'd go out and hunt and not see any deer. Well, the reason they were seeing 30 deer a day and 20 deer a day in the 90s was because deer herds were going up and up and up. Well, that had to end. I mean, I warned some of the game departments in some articles that I wrote, don't get comfortable here because I know the hunters are happy now because they're seeing lots of deer, but that will have to end. Deer numbers cannot keep growing every year. Sooner or later, the habitat's going to say no more, and then the deer numbers will start to drop.
Right.
And that's exactly what we're seeing. For a number of reasons, we're seeing deer numbers dropping. And, of course, hunters are complaining. These young guys who grew up thinking it was normal to see 30 deer a day, they're not able to, they don't understand why they're only seeing 5 deer a day. So, and it's happening for a number of reasons, this decrease in deer all across the range. Weather has become a factor. We've got crazy weather patterns we have not always had, like out in Montana, North Dakota, et cetera. We have summer droughts that cause EHD disease to be more common.
Okay.
We've got so weather's a factor. We've got some terrible winter snows that have affected your deer up there where you are, as well as out through the Midwest. And right now in Colorado and in those areas, they are getting hammered with snow, and the deer are really suffering. So we've got these weather situations that are sort of weird lately, and I don't think they're going to change. I think we're sort of in a pattern where we're going to see that now, and that's affecting deer numbers. We've got disease problems we've never had before, including, or at least the amounts we've never had before, in part because of weather. Epizootic hemorrhagic disease is much more common than it used to be because of weather patterns. And then, of course, we've got chronic wasting disease breathing down our neck.
Right.
And then we probably overmanaged the deer. Because we had such large numbers, game departments had more liberal doe seasons. And in certain areas, in pockets of areas, we probably overshot the deer, which has been part of the problem. That's easily solvable. All you got to do is lower the doe permits, and the deer will come back. And so that problem is easily solvable. But we've had you're right. We've got declining deer herds in a lot of areas right now, deer populations, and the hunters don't like that. But they're just going to have to be a little patient. Game departments do the best they can, but they can't do things overnight. It takes a while. And so I don't think we're in dire straits by any stretch of the imagination. Our deer herds are healthy. They just happen to be declining in some areas, and we're going to have to figure out harvest numbers based on weather patterns and diseases and other things.
Right. Yeah, you can't turn the Titanic on a dime. You got to start a few miles back.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Gotcha. You have observed lots of things over the last 30 years, whether it be wildlife biology or hunting itself. Are there particular hunters that you've come to know over the years that you hold in higher regard as far as their skill set of whitetail hunting?
Oh, yeah. Oh my, yes.
Which ones stick out in your head?
Some some of your listeners, some will know,
yeah,
and some they will have never heard of. I'll give you one you never heard of.
Okay.
And he's a friend of mine from North Carolina. His name is Ron Stevens. And he's in I have a little lease with 4 friends in Ohio, and he's a member of that that lease. And I met Ron in 1988 or thereabouts in Iowa on a deer hunt in a camp. And I learned, and it was with a very famous guide. And the first thing Ron said to me when they picked me up one night was, and I had seen a big buck that night, 50 yards from my tree stand. And when they picked me up, Ron said, "Do you see where your stand is?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "It's in the wrong place. It should be 50 yards down that ravine further." Now, I have no idea how he knew that, but that's where the big buck went, right where he said my stand should be.
Really?
And over the week, Ron and I spent time together, and most of the stand sites that he and I went to, he said they're in the wrong place. And that son of a gun I've learned over the years. He has killed, by the way, 14 Boone and Crockett bucks with his bow.
Wow.
Which is unheard of. Now, he hunts a lot, and he hunts where the big bucks are. There's no question about that. I mean, he hunts Ohio, Iowa. He hunts Saskatchewan. I mean, Ron, over the years, has hunted a lot. But he knew where to put stands better than he knows where you should be better than any hunter, man or woman, that I have ever met. And a really interesting, neat guy. And I love him dearly because he at my age, up on our deer lease, he does things for me that allow me to still get out there and hunt.
Right.
Helps me put up my ladder stand up there because I have a little bit of a disability that I can't do that myself. So, I really appreciate people like Ron because they help me stay in the woods, and I love it. That would be one that you haven't heard of.
One that sticks
and there's
out.
Probably and there's many of those kind of people scattered around the country who just spend a lot of time. But then I mentioned Gene and Barry Wenzel, and in the bow hunting world, especially the traditional, they shoot recurves. They are in their early 70s. And they're identical twins, former chiropractors who killed a lot of big bucks in Montana where they lived for years. And they moved after retirement. They retired and moved to Iowa because that's where they wanted to hunt deer.
Right.
And those boys spend every day in the woods scouting and looking at deer. Literally, not quite every day, but they're out there 300 days a year studying deer. And they pass up bucks that you and I would say is a buck of a lifetime. They pass up those bucks every year, lots of them, because they're hunting a particular older buck, and they're very successful at it. And I have great admiration for them for a couple reasons, but one of the main reasons is they share their knowledge with people through articles and phone calls or whatever, and they are 100% ethical. And wouldn't even think about violating a hunting law, no matter what. And I just admire the time they put in and the effort and their professionalism. They are two of the finest men that I've ever met, and they are great bow hunters. In particular, they have revolutionized hunting using the wind. They have studied wind patterns. In fact, Gene wrote a book about wind patterns. Come November is the name of his book, Come November, and it has several chapters on wind patterns and how winds move through the woods, etc. And they do that. I'll mention one other quick thing. Barry Wenzel runs a buck camp, a 3-day camp every March and April, where hunters can pay a fee and spend 3 days with Barry, and he'll take you in the woods and teach you all this stuff.
No kidding.
And I took that camp about 7 years ago or 8 years ago with some friends, and it was fantastic. And so you just Google Barry Wenzel's name, and it'll get you to their website, and you can learn about his camp. And I don't want to sound self-promotional to this, but I've been to that camp, and it's worth every penny, and you will learn more in 3 days about hunting big bucks than you did in your whole lifetime.
No kidding. Okay, that's very good information to know. So let's talk about some of your strategies and techniques that you've developed over the years. Let's talk about some of your gear. What do you hunt with? I take it you're more or less a bow hunter. Do you ever get into the guns?
No.
Okay. So
I haven't gun hunted since I was 26 or so.
No kidding.
When I would take my dad in his older age, I would take him to the first day of gun season in Pennsylvania and also down here in West Virginia.
Okay.
But when he passed, before he passed, he couldn't hunt anymore, I quit gun hunting.
Okay.
And so I'm totally a bow hunter.
Totally a bow hunter.
A bow hunter.
What do you shoot? What's your preferred bow setup?
Well, I'm using a compound bow for a couple of reasons. I shot recurves till 1986, and then I switched to compound for a couple of reasons. One major reason, I was an outdoor writer, and I had to write stuff on equipment And since the majority of hunters use compound bows, I needed to know a little bit more about them.
Right.
And then the second reason was I can shoot more accurately with a compound bow.
Right.
And so I moved to the compound bow. And then I had a bad surgery 11 years ago now. Surgery went astray, and a surgeon cut the nerve to my diaphragm by mistake during the same day heart procedure. And so that changed my life totally because I lost my diaphragm, and about 60 or 70% of my breathing I lost.
Right.
And that took away my ability to even try to shoot a recurve.
Right.
So I'm shooting a lightweight 48-pound compound bow, and 48 pounds is plenty. I've killed brown bears with it, and black bears and elk and whatever. So
gotcha.
So I use a compound bow. And you ask about particular strategies. I will just say this: I love to be off the ground. I know ground blinds work, and right now in my health situation, I can't go stalking through the woods very readily because I have trouble with breathing.
Yeah.
So I either sit in a ground blind or I sit in a ladder stand, or a tree stand. And I'm not a fan of ground blinds. I know they work real well, and I've killed deer out of them. But I love to be able to see more, and so I love being off the ground, and I can see further than I can when I'm in a ground blind. But I love those ladder stands now more than I do tree stands because they're easier for me to get in.
Gotcha.
And by the way, let me just insert one quick thing here.
Sure.
A lot of younger bow hunters seem to think they're invincible, and they're not using harnesses in the tree stands.
Right.
I want to go one step further. I want to urge all of your listeners, bow and gun, put a lifeline above your tree stand to the ground and attach a lifeline is, as if most of you will know, a lifeline is just a line that you can buy that you attach to your tree. And when you go to get on your ladder or your tree stand to climb into it, you hook your safety harness to the lifeline and use it as you climb into the stand and when you climb out of the stand.
Right. And
it's a lifesaver, and especially for us older guys, where our balance isn't as good as it was when we were younger. And so all of my stands have lifelines in them, and it's a good safety measure. But anyway, I love getting off the ground.
Gotcha. I've actually bought my first lifeline this year, actually, and I think it's one of those things I'm going to keep adding to my bag of tricks because
you got to have it.
It just makes sense. I mean, it's common sense.
Yeah.
So, do you care about scent control and camouflage?
Well, let's do camouflage first.
Okay.
I've written some articles, and I have a chapter in a book on how deer see, and I won't go through the details of the anatomy of a whitetail deer's eye, but the iris of the eye is so shaped. Ours is round, and so we don't. If we look at a particular spot, everything to the outside of that spot is a little bit blurry. But that's not true for a whitetail deer. A whitetail deer has an elliptical shaped iris. Mm-hmm. So when he's looking at a spot, everything's clear to him to the right and the left, maybe as far as 80 yards. So a deer can see motion a lot better than we can.
Right.
And I mean they can see motion not just where their head is facing, but off to the side of where their head is facing. Gotcha. They can see perfectly well. So camouflage, I don't think a deer cares what kind of camouflage you have on. But it's all about your moving and motion when you're in a stand. So any camouflage that makes it harder for a deer to see you when you move, if you move your arm or your leg or your head, and then your camouflage hat or your gloves or your jacket or your pants are important if they make it harder for a deer to see that motion. And so a lot of camouflage patterns will do that for you. So
Gotcha. All right.
So the key there is motion, and when you're in a stand, especially.
So
that's what deer see.
Biologically, they are in tune with movement, and if you're not playing the movement card, then you're in trouble.
That's correct. Okay. Exactly correct. And there's science to back that up. And now scent control. I mean, I'm big on scent control, and if you took the top 10 bow hunters which is in my area, if you talk to the top 10 bow hunters in the world for whitetail deer and ask them what's the most important thing, they're going to tell you scent control, and they're right. And in my opinion, so I do everything I can for scent control. I have all my hunting clothes out in my man cave outside the house. Outside, I have a man cave, and when I had that man cave little shed of mine built, I told the guy, I want you to make this as airtight as possible when you build it. And he did. It's a dandy. So my hunting clothes are not only inside that shed, away from automobile smells in my garage or my wife's perfume in the bedroom or whatever. I'm out in the man cave where hopefully there's no odor.
Right.
And then in addition, inside my shed where my hunting clothes and all my equipment is kept, I have scent containers where I keep all my clothes inside.
Gotcha.
Those containers. And I go to great effort to do the same thing when I go hunting. I pack them in my car, my clothes in those scent containers. When I get to wherever I'm going to hunt, I keep those scent containers outside, and as much as possible, I don't contaminate what I'm wearing with my environment inside the house where I'm staying, or inside a hotel, or in a hunting lodge, or wherever. I keep my clothes outside and keep them to the air as much as possible. And then, of course, you do all these things to reduce your human odor as well, with scent-free soaps and et cetera. And I go to great lengths to try to do that. I'm not a total fanatic, but I do as much as I possibly can, and including the scent sprays and the other pieces of equipment that are now available that reduce your odor while you're in the stand, et cetera.
Gotcha. All right. Very good. Now, as far as, and you wrote an article about this a little while ago, you say that deer will avoid your tree stand, but there are things you can do to make sure that they don't. Can you tell me about that a little bit?
Well, there's research that shows that there's research that shows if you hunt your stand a lot, I mean, deer figure it out,
right,
and they'll avoid it during the year. So there's a couple things, and one most important. Bill Winke has this show called Midwestern Whitetails,
yep,
TV show out in Iowa. And Bill taught me this through his writings, et cetera, years ago. How you approach your stand and how you leave your stand is critical to the wind and creating odor. So if you can position your stand as such that you can get to it without crossing a trail where the deer is going to normally come to your direction. And one way to do that is use stream bottoms. And Bill does that a lot in Iowa. When you go to your stand, if you can, put some rubber boots on and use real small streams and walk in those rather than walk on the land to get to your stand. So entry and exit from your stand relative to the wind and where deer will walk is critical, and I pay way more attention to that as an older hunter than I did when I was a young hunter. When I was a young hunter, I never even thought about it. Just walked to my stand, and that's fine for those little. That's one of those things when the Wenzel brothers said to me, "You're just hunting little bucks. You need to start hunting older bucks." Well, that's one of those tricks. When I was younger, I just walked to the stand. I never thought about deer smelling me walking in there, and the reason is I was seeing lots of little deer, and I'll be honest with you, yearling bucks don't care about that stuff either. They haven't learned.
Right.
Believe me, 3.5-year-old bucks, they know where humans have been, and they know where you've been 3 days before.
Right.
So getting in and out is a critical factor for any hunter.
Gotcha. Fascinating.
Especially for your scent control, getting in and out of your stand, how you enter and exit is critical. And then another thing is only hunt that stand when the wind conditions are right.
Okay.
And when the wind's going, you will know. If you put a stand up, you know where you put it there because you think a deer are going to come in a certain direction. Well, the wind conditions have to be right for deer to come in that direction. And those conditions may not be right 9 days out of 10. Well, that just means 9 days out of 10 you should not be in that stand.
Gotcha.
Deer don't walk around the woods randomly. I mean, they pick their path. They use the wind all the time to pick where they're going to walk, and which makes that's what makes hunting them so hard.
Right.
So you need to be very critical about where you when you hunt your stand.
Gotcha. All right. Very, very fascinating. So, Dr. Dave, I wonder if we could go on a little deer hunt with you and ask you to think of a memorable deer hunt that you've been on recently or whenever. And I was wondering if you could describe it in detail for us about from beginning to the kill shot. Where are we going to go?
Yep, we're going to go to Iowa.
Iowa. All right. Excellent.
And it was my second hunt ever to Iowa. And this was back in 1998.
Okay.
And I had just retired that year, so I could make hunting trips that I couldn't formally make because my teaching job tied me down.
Yep.
And so I went to Iowa to hunt with Ruby Custer in southwestern Iowa. And I was hunting. She had the stands up. Ruby was a guide, and she had stands up in various places. She put me in a stand, and every day, I was there for 3 days, and every morning a buck would come up this ridge, and it was about a 135-inch 10-point, not a monster, but a record book buck. And he'd come out of range, and so one where I couldn't shoot him, and I thought, I got to see what's going on here. So 10 o'clock in the morning, I got down, and I walked down this ridge from where the buck had been coming. And then further down the ridge, the more deer sign I would see, buck sign. I mean, more rubs, more scrapes.
Yep.
And I got to an intersection down there in a little ravine where this one ridge came down into a creek bottom, and there was a rub as big as my thigh. And I knew it wasn't the buck that I'd been seeing, but it was obvious there was a big buck in that area. I can hunt this big buck. And I put a tree stand up. I moved the stand. And got it finished about noon. Ruby picked me up. I went back to camp, ate a bite to eat, and sure enough, the wind switched to an east wind that afternoon. I said, I'm going to that stand, and I did. And at 5:30, just as it was getting a little bit dark, here he comes.
Yeah.
It was the biggest buck I've ever killed. He scored 172.
Nice.
He came down that trail, rubbed that rub again, made a scrape. Came up. It was a little bit of a long shot, but I made a really good shot and killed the biggest buck of my life. And when people ask me what's your favorite hunt of all time, and I've taken 50 Pope and Young animals over the years and a number of bears and stuff in Africa, but my favorite hunt of all would be that one right there.
That one right there.
That biggest whitetail. Yeah.
That's very cool.
What a thrill. I mean, I remember every intimate detail like it was yesterday.
Right.
Yeah.
I love those hunts, the ones that stick out like that. Every little second that you remember is fascinating.
Yeah. I do. I mean, I remember I remember when I came around, I saw the buck running, and I didn't know I'd hit him very good. And when I got down to where he was standing, there was a lot of sign that I had hit him good. And I walked around the trail 60 yards, and there he was laying in the trail. And I hollered, and I fell down to my knees. I mean, I remember everything about it.
Right.
Gosh, it was great.
Yeah, it's amazing how your memory gets painted so vividly on certain events.
He was such a great animal. I'm looking at him right now, by the way. He's right here in my den.
Yes.
Yeah.
I get that. Very cool. I have 10 rapid fire questions for you, Dr. Dave, and I didn't prep you for these, and I think they usually end up better because I don't. So I was wondering if we could go through those. All right. Number one, what's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think we touched on it here a little bit, but I think my number one tip for whitetail deer is watching your scent and hunting your stand at the right time.
Excellent.
Hunters tend to overhunt their stands, and they keep going back in there and go back in there, and that does two things. First off, they're going in there when the wind isn't right. Secondly, they're going in and putting scent on that trail in and out.
Right.
And so I think overhunting a stand is probably mine. For the average hunter, I think that's the biggest mistake.
Number one. Okay. All right. We all have these items that we bring into the woods with us. Maybe they're good luck charms. Maybe they're actually a useful tool. Other than your weapon, what's that one thing for you?
Well, I sure love my rangefinder.
Yeah.
I really love my rangefinder. When I get up into my stand, even though I've been in that stand before lots of times, I will range trees and trails so that I don't have to mess with it when a big buck walks in there. I'll know exactly how far he is or pretty close. And I shoot with bow sights now, and I got to know where they are.
Right.
And so I do love that rangefinder.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good one. I like mine too. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
You mean related to hunting?
No, just in general. Just like what bothers you the most?
Okay, I will tell you. I will tell you, and some people might get upset.
Okay.
Maybe it's being an old college professor. Maybe people say, "Well, you're just a snob." But I watch hunting shows more than I used to because I'm disabled and I'm retired, and so I'm not in the woods as much as I used to be. So I watch a lot of these hunting shows, and hunters using poor grammar really bugs the snot out of me. And I'll tell you why it does. It bugs me because it gives people the impression that we're stupid.
Right.
Because we can't speak good English, and we're not stupid. And we're not stupid because we don't speak good. I mean, I'm a good old country boy, and a lot of my country friends don't always use the best grammar. But on television, when hunters so often use poor grammar, that bothers me.
Right. All right. I agree.
That's a pet peeve.
Yep. That's one of mine too. It's not my biggest one, but it's up there for sure. All right. You're 76 years old today?
Yeah.
All right. Knowing what you know today, what would you tell the 30-year-old Dave Samuel?
Well, you know what? Another pet peeve of mine, and it involves this particular question that you just asked.
Sure.
Is watching these hunting shows and the way these hunters react when they kill an animal.
Yeah, yeah.
We never did that.
Right.
I think it shows irreverence to the animal to just scream and holler and then use some verbiage. I slammed that sucker and that kind of stuff when you shoot a big buck. I think the animal deserves a whole lot more respect than what it appears from a bunch of younger hunters. Now, I don't know where they get this. I don't know if they learned it from watching TV shows or what.
Right.
But all this jumping up and down and hollering and using verbiage related to the animal that doesn't show respect, that's a pet peeve. And also, it would be my advice is, tone it down a little bit and respect the animal.
Yeah.
This isn't about you.
Right. Right.
Killing the animal isn't about you. It's about the animal and respect of the animal.
Right. Yeah, I've always felt that reaction is copied. Like they're watching it, and they think that's how they're supposed to react. But if you were really in tune with your emotions, you would probably feel the release of the adrenaline and the end of the adrenaline in a more of a melancholy feel. I don't think jumping up and down and pounding your fist on your chest is the way you really feel. Is probably how you think you're supposed to react. It just doesn't seem right to me.
You know, I don't mean to say that I'm better than anybody else because I know that I'm not. But I've probably killed 300 deer with a bow over the years, does and bucks over the years. In fact, I know I have. And I've never once pumped my arm up and down and back and forth and did all that in my tree stand after I shot a deer.
No.
It never even entered my mind.
No.
To go through some of those gyrations
and
even think some of the things that I hear on television just as totally escapes me.
Right.
I mean, it's always been a real simple thank you, Lord.
Right.
After shooting an animal. That's always been and I've done that since I was a kid.
Right. Yeah.
and that seemed to be enough. And so anyway,
yeah. Usually, it's the initial reaction is I finally exhale, and because I'm usually all ramped up, and then I sit down like, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
So.
Gotcha. All right. So you're at a hunting convention somewhere in the world. You meet a stranger, and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you say?
Well, right now I say I'm retired and I'm an outdoor writer.
Mm-hmm.
But because that's true, I'm retired. But I'm also, I'm retired from my professor job.
Yeah.
But I still do my outdoor writing. I don't do as much of it. I do my no whitetail column for Whitetail Journal magazine, and I do my no hunting KNOW, my no hunting column for Bowhunter Magazine.
Yep.
And then I write an outdoor page in the Sunday newspaper here in town, in Morgantown,
Gotcha.
West Virginia. But so I'm still a writer. But even that, I've curtailed a lot of it because I'm older and I hunt more and I spend time with my granddaughter and that kind of thing. But
gotcha. All right. Very cool. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had a bowl of Cheerios and a banana.
All right. Very good.
That was my quickie breakfast because I knew you were going to call.
Right. Gotcha. All right. You get your own billboard on the side of a highway. It's a blank canvas. What would you put on it?
Hunters pay for conservation.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
And I might put some other, smaller stuff on there, but I think the average public needs to understand that they are not paying for it. Hunters do.
Right.
There's, that it's a bit of a paradox that we kill animals, but we love them. But the frank truth is, we care about animals more than anybody on the planet.
Right. Right. That's a very good one. I haven't heard that yet, but that's excellent.
And we put our money where our mouth is.
Right. Yep. That's right.
True.
All right. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
Successful. Wow. Oh, my.
It's a heavy-duty question.
Well, it doesn't relate to hunting.
That's okay.
It won't relate to hunting, but first person, really, my grandfather.
Okay.
He was a very unique, successful man in many, many ways. Christian man. He taught me Bible study. He taught me about the woods. He would take me for walks when I was a young kid in the woods. He knew poetry. He was a congressman for a year. He owned a home construction business. Very successful businessman. Yep. He was very influential in my life.
Sounds like a very interesting man.
He was.
Yep. All right, Dr. Dave, what's a day in the life of Dr. Dave look like? A typical day.
Today?
Yeah.
It's pretty laid back. I'm going to work on a Sunday newspaper column this morning.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm going to take a walk because we got for some crazy reason it's 65 degrees here in West Virginia this morning.
Right. Which
is extremely unusual for this part of the world.
Yep.
So I'm going to do that, and that's really all that's on tomorrow. Now tomorrow, I'm going to drive up to my lease in Ohio and bow hunt a couple days because although it's going to get cold again, but I've got a doe permit still available, so I'm going to go up and some of the boys are going to be there.
What's a typical deer hunting day in your life look like?
Whoa, I go on a lot of guided hunts.
Okay.
Because in my old age I can afford to, and secondly, my health is such that I need help.
Gotcha.
So a guided hunt is definitely different than my old days of hopping in my car and going getting my own ladder stand, et cetera. So that's different. In my old age, a typical day is a lot different. I'd rely on guides.
Right. Gotcha. All right. Very good. So that's the end of the 10 rapid fire questions. Thank you for your answers on that, Dave. Where can we find more about you? If we listen to the show, we want to learn more. Where can we go?
Well, I took down my website, so you can Google my name and stuff will come up.
Okay.
You already did that, and you found some articles on bowhunting.net.
Exactly.
Because I write for them, although I don't do it as much now than I did last year. But that would be it. My two deer books, they're all sold out, so that's a little difficult as well. But I have a couple deer books, and I'm sure you can find used copies on Amazon.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Just Google my name, and you'll find Whitetail Advantage and my antler book, and both of those are full of it kind of information we've been talking about.
Excellent. Very, very good. Well, thank you, Dave. This has been an honor and a pleasure, and I really enjoyed listening to you explain some of the things that you've covered over the years and some of the strategies and techniques that you've developed. Very fascinating. Thank you for doing that.
Okay, it's been my pleasure.
Well, thanks to Dr. Dave Samuel for spilling his guts and telling us. We covered a lot of material, and I covered a lot of stuff that Dave has written about and a lot of stuff that he hasn't written about. But just a really smart guy. You can tell he spent a lot of time studying the whitetail, and to be able to teach at West Virginia University for as long as he did, the 30 years, and then go and get a job being a writer for an outdoor bow hunting magazine, and then actually becoming a pretty darn good bow hunter himself. Just a fascinating life. It's kind of life I'd like to have someday.
Yeah, that's very cool, and it definitely takes a special kind of person to be a doctor and study the whitetail.
Yep, yeah, it's very fascinating. So that's a hard act to follow, Dusty, and you certainly poured your guts into helping Rob out in the first segment of the show, but do you have a additional Chubby Tines tip of the week?
Yeah, I do, Jay, and it's something that's popping up here. A lot of people pulling their bucks out of their freezer, headed to the taxidermist this time of year. And
the Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Everybody says, well, where do you go and what do you do when you take your deer to a taxidermist? And, first thing I do, I find somebody and I go look at their work. If you're wanting to get a good quality deer mount done, you need to go see what they're producing. Most taxidermists have a showroom or an area where they're working on deer, and they're going to have it from the start to the finish. And if it's not something that you like visually, you're probably not going to like it once it's hanging in your living room. You got to look at it for the rest of your life. Take your time, do your research on your taxidermist. Some people like a particular different look, and some people like a completely different look than the other person. So take your time and don't just go off your buddy's recommendation. Go look at their work and make sure it's what you want and what you think you're going to like. And another thing is, taxidermists, some of them say, yeah, I'd like to have half up front. Some of them say I'd like to have full payment. I look at it like this. If I go somewhere and I buy something and I give them half the money, I don't expect them to give me the product right away. They once they produce the product, then I'll pay the rest. So take that into consideration. As far as if you walk in a taxidermy shop and you pay them up front, full payment, that's almost like, to me, and this is my personal preference, helping everybody out. If you pay full payment, they've already got your money. Then what do you got? You don't have nothing saying that they need that other half of the mount. Does that make sense, Jay?
I think half deposit is fine, because then you can hold them accountable for doing the quality work that you would expect them to do on your trophy.
Yeah, and then when it comes time for your trophy to be, and a lot of taxidermists are 6 months to a year behind, and that's okay. Don't get excited. That's something that a taxidermist don't want to hear as a phone call every other week saying, where's my deer at? Sometimes you get yourself in a predicament. If you pay the full cost right up front, it may slow down getting your mount back. And that's just something I experienced. And not every taxidermist is like that. But just, use your head and go in it and get what you want out of your taxidermy work.
Completely agree. I think you got it spot on. Very, very good. Dusty, it's been a fantastic show, and I'd like to say thank you to our listeners for tuning in with us as they do each and every week, and hopefully you come back and join us next week, and actually you want to be kind of tuning in for at least the next 3 months, because we've got some amazing interviews coming up, and we'll start announcing those as they start to come together. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank Morse's Sporting Goods for sponsoring the show, Sunlock and Forcer for sponsoring the show as well, and thanks to Advanced Takedown Tree Stands for helping us out and letting us take a look at their tree stands as well. Dusty, it's been a great time, and unfortunately it's time for us to go, but we'll be back next week. Where can we find you when you're not hanging out here with me?
You can shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. Look me up on Facebook, Chubby Tines Outdoors, or if you're on Instagram, @Chasing Antler. Jay, where can people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
best place to contact me is jay@bigbuckregistry.com. You can also or you can also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. We're about to turn 250,000 diehard deer hunting followers over there. We're also on Instagram, bigbuckregistry.com/Instagram, and on Twitter, twitter.com/bigbuckregistry. And we're on YouTube, youtube.com/bigbuckregistry. If you would like to tune into the show and listen to the show, there are a bunch of different places you can do it. Specifically, you can go to iTunes. I assume that might be probably the number one place where this show is downloaded. But you can also check us out on Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Blueberry, and all of our audio each and every week. Even if they're not regular videos, all of our audio is converted to a video, so that you can actually listen to the show by going to YouTube. And again, that's bigbuckregistry.com/YouTube. Well, I think that is a wrap, my friend. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
This is the Big Buck Registry Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.